Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Hai Nguyen. I'm co-founder of Affluence, the company behind Pretty Matrix. I want to let you know that this webinar is recorded, and so I'll be sharing the recording with everyone afterward. And then also in the chat section, there's a place for you to send some comments. So if you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to share your questions there, and I'd be happy to address those questions after my demo and presentation. My goals for today, this is a guide to Pretty Matrix for beginners. So I'm going to make the assumption that you haven't had too much experience yet with Pretty Matrix. Yet at the same time, even if you've had used the product before, I'm going to try to give you some tips and tricks for you to be extremely effective at using the software. So I'm hoping that you'll become more effective at prioritizing your tasks, projects, and emails, help you envision what your work and life success may look like with Pretty Matrix, and then most importantly, help you understand 20% of the features that will give you 80% of the benefits. I think that's my most important goal because at the end of the day, there's so many capabilities in Pretty Matrix and in any software system, really. But really, there's just only a small fraction that if you're able to use that to the fullest extent, you'll get the most out of it. And I'm hoping that right when you get out of this webinar, you're able to implement all of this immediately. And then also, I will be addressing both the individual and the team level. So hopefully you'll get a strategy on how to prioritize your own personal tasks. But then at the same time, if you're implementing this across your team, your division, your organization, you're able to actually pass some of these best practices to other team members. There's three reasons why customer comes to Pretty Matrix. One, to be better at keeping track on the status of work across many areas of responsibilities. The reality is we just have so many things that's on our plate at any point in. It's actually very, very difficult to be able to understand exactly what we need to work on. And then secondly, to create alignment across team members so everyone knows what's important. I think one of the biggest challenges I've seen is that you have an organization, you're working together, you think you're all rowing in the same direction, but in reality, people are actually all going in separate ways, right? Pushing towards different directions, and you're not actually working together. So Pretty Matrix gives you this very tangible way to actually be on the same page, to have clarity across the entire team. And then thirdly, to take back control of emails and meetings. I think if you're like me and with so many of us, we just get so many emails. And guess what? You're always responding to that last email in. Instead of looking at the most important emails, instead of making sure that you're responding to the most important emails, you're just constantly bombarded by new emails that's coming in. And therefore, these urgent tasks just pull us away from what's truly important. And then the corollary to that is what happens when you don't prioritize. And I think, the first thing is we lose sight on what's important and we end up working on the wrong things. I think spending all your time and effort and resources working on the wrong things is actually probably the worst way possible, because instead you should be on vacation. Instead, you should be thinking. Instead, you should be doing anything else. So working on the wrong things is extremely detrimental to both our sense of worth as well as our productivity. And then you feel busy, but you're not meeting your goals. So that means you're just working on things, but they don't all align together. And not only that, maybe they don't align across the organization. And then you're overwhelmed by emails and meetings. And I think that's the same thing that applies to us. Even, me, I use Pretty Matrix religiously to prioritize my emails and my tasks. And yet at the same time, when you have so many things going on, it's very, very difficult to actually have one central place to have clarity of purpose. So what is Pretty Matrix? It's a software that is a comprehensive Pretty Matrix email, priority, and project management that actually covers all of those at the same time. And it helps at three different levels. At the individual level, which I think is the most important, it helps you prioritize your most important tasks and emails every single day. So you know exactly what you need to work on. You know exactly what are the things that's important, when they're due, and all that. At the team level, what it does is actually helps everyone be on the same page. So one of the things that's extremely important is if you're able to understand what you're working on, and if you're able to help each of your team members understand what they need to work on, then suddenly you have alignment on those key projects. At the organizational level, if everyone within your organization is using Pretty Matrix, one of the most magical thing happens, which is being able to have one single source of truth so that everyone knows exactly what's going on across the organization and know the goals and priorities within everyone's department and everyone's purpose. And one of the things that is fascinating about Protomatrix is the ability for it to be transferred. You know, you can transfer a task, you can redelegate a task to another person, and with it comes the entire history of all the changes, of all the reasons, the rationale on why you change a priority, why you change a due date, and so forth. So Protomatrix at the organizational level actually helps with employee onboarding and offboarding as part of the whole process. So what makes Protomatrix better than any of the other existing solution is it's the only software that's Microsoft 365 security certified across Teams app, Outlook app, and web app at the same time. And we're deeply integrated into the Microsoft ecosystem. So if you happen to use Microsoft Office and Teams and Outlook and all that, we're actually at the forefront with respect to all the integrations. Now, you don't need to be a Microsoft suite users to use Protomatrix. Our software works completely independent, but if you do use the Microsoft ecosystem, it's almost a no-brainer. And we're also one of the very first Copilot integrations within the Microsoft Teams ecosystem. So not only that, I believe we are the first Copilot Microsoft 365 certified solution as well. So what that means is that, you know, if your organization is starting to invest in some of the AI technology and just want to have a better understanding of all your data and all that, Protomatrix is already there at the forefront. I just want to mention that because, you know, Protomatrix will grow with you. So even when you first use Protomatrix at a personal level and you're just prioritizing some of your tasks, after a while, you start expanding usage of Protomatrix across, you know, larger and larger teams and all that. Protomatrix is already there with all the capabilities that you need to advance your usage. Thirdly, Protomatrix focuses on prioritization, hence the name of our product, front and center every step of the way. So what I want to show you today too is how to use Protomatrix in a visual way to understand your priorities and communicate your priorities. We also provide what I call people-centric collaboration. And you probably use so many other project management software or task management software before. You have your task list, you have your notebook with all the things you have, right? Everyone does that. But what happens with Protomatrix is that if you use our system, we can actually flip all that data around and actually show you the things you have to do for a specific person. It is so valuable when you have one-on-one meetings or you work with the clients or you work with the colleagues across many responsibilities. Protomatrix is one of the very unique software that actually show you what I call people-centric view on all the things you have to do. And then Protomatrix is available as a SaaS solution, which is what I'll show today. But also, if you're in healthcare and life sciences, we have a HIPAA compliant solution. And then if you're in state, local government, we actually have an Azure Government Cloud solution. And of course, private enterprise deployment for our enterprise customers. And then lastly, one of the things that I'm very cognizant about is how do we actually leverage AI to focus on very, very important challenges that you have. So I'll be showing only a few features on the AI side, but there's a couple of things I want to mention just in case you're interested, which is the ability to summarize your projects, the ability to summarize your task, the ability to actually take meaning out of all the work that you have. So if you're interested in any of those other solutions, definitely reach out to us and I'd be happy to show that to you. So what makes Protomatrix effective is that it focuses on a very visual way to tell you what you need to do now, what to do later, what to delegate. And then the last part of that is that with the recognition that priorities are constantly shifting. You know, there's no one priority list that you have and that's the end all, right? You have to accept the fact that priorities changes all the time, and Protomatrix offer one place where everyone can go to know exactly what needs to be done. So let's start with the fundamental behind Protomatrix. So there's a famous quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." Now, what I really like about this quote is that instead of actually looking at our to-do list, what we want to look at is what are the things that is truly important and what are the things that are truly urgent. And so when you take everything that you have to do and you split it into these dimensions, what you get is you get what's called the Eisenhower Matrix. And it's a simple, powerful time management framework that pretty much categorizes your task into the dimensions of importance and urgency, right? What are the important and urgent tasks that I need to focus on? What are the fires I need to fight? And then what are the important but not urgent tasks that I need to start thinking about and plan for? And then what are the things I can delegate to others? And then what's everything else? What are the things I can drop? And thinking about what to work on and thinking about what not to work on are both equally important. So the Eisenhower Matrix helps you prioritize tasks and then make the most out of your time, especially if we have more things to do than the resources to do them. And so if that statement resonates with you, you know that your ambitions are high, right? And not only that, you're probably assigned so many things at the same time. What Proto Matrix does is it helps you gain clarity on where you can best spend your effort. So the Eisenhower Matrix splits it into these 4 quadrants. So input matrix or implementation is basically categorizing all your tasks into these 4. So what are the things that are important and urgent? That's your do now. That's where you need to work on today, this week. Then what are the things that are important but not urgent? That's the stuff you start planning for. And then delegate and inbox. And so instead of having one long list of all the things you have to do and then adding more to that list, and then deciding to work just because something's at the top of the list or the bottom of the list, instead you look at the matrix here and you determine, okay, the stuff in the top left is where I need to spend my time and efforts. And by the way, one of the things that's not so obvious about all of this is that a lot of this processing happens in our brain. So imagine, I asked you to do the simple exercise. Imagine going and write down your to-do list, breaking it down, organize into the Eisenhower Matrix. And then here's the thing, walk around the office and start comparing notes with your coworkers who would do the exact same exercise. So if you're a manager and you have 5 or 10 direct reports, right? Ask them to do this exact same exercise of writing down their priorities, putting into the 4 quadrants here. And then when you look at your priority list and you look at their priority list, do you guys sync up? That's a very, very simple ask. And it's not something that we do enough time. What happens is a lot of us have this, we just think that, we are on the same page as everybody else. But the reality is that's true 90% of the time, but 10% of the time, you actually have this mismatch in priorities and it's not explicit enough. So the best analogy I can come up with is when you're walking around the office, imagine everyone having an Eisenhower matrix floating above their head, right? Their priority matrix floating above their head. You can look at it, and if you see all alignment, you're great. And then once in a while, when you spot that misalignment, then you can focus on those conversations. And so instead of having a meeting just to things that everyone's already agrees on, you can have a meeting to talk about the things that you disagree on or you don't have alignment yet. So the 4 quadrant Eisenhower matrix create alignments because it forces you to prioritize from the beginning. So when you use Priority Matrix, you can't just go and have it all in one quadrant. You can't just go and have it all in one list. I urge you to actually make that hard decision right away and start putting things into the appropriate quadrants, and then again asking everyone else to do the same thing. And what's interesting is that success from using Priority Matrix isn't always about finding what everyone agrees on. It's about discovering disagreements on what should be a priority when it isn't. So a couple of tips to shortcut your success. One, if you're a manager, one of the things I encourage you to do is create a project for your staff meetings and then screen share it during your meetings. So you'll find this to be extremely valuable almost immediately. And if you have a staff meeting this week, go ahead and create a Priority Matrix. Go ahead and write down the priorities that you have. And then in your meeting, just share it on the screen. And then your conversation will be so much more fruitful right away. If you happen to manage multiple sites or multiple projects or multiple locations, then create a Priority Matrix project for each of those sites and location. So what that means is that you should have a priority matrix for everything that are independent, right? Because you don't want to mix them all together. Then it actually becomes very difficult to understand what it is you need to work on. If you have specific initiatives or programs that are recurring, then leverage the Priority Matrix template system. So then you can actually create guidelines and and initiate them whenever you have another one of those training programs or initiative. As an example, let's just say if you have an employee onboarding process, you can actually create a template in Matrix to actually build out those action items that you have to do for employee onboarding. And then whenever you have a new employee, simply activate it, and then all the tasks and all the priorities will be created for you. If you're a business owner, a small business owner, then create a project for each of your departments, and then have each of your executive team member be in charge of each of those projects. And now you can actually just go into the Matrix and know exactly what everyone's working on. And then lastly, if you're an individual contributor, create a project for your goals. And so one of the things I think is extremely important is making sure that you use Matrix to further whatever it is that you care most about. So for example, if you're looking for a promotion this year, then use Matrix to manage the tasks that you have to do in order to achieve that. I do want to mention that the webinars are recorded and they're posted here on our website, affluence.com/webinars. And also we actually have the equivalent translated version into a lot of other languages. So if you have team members that actually need access to Matrix training and webinars in other languages, reach out to us and we'd be happy to share those with you. With that, I'm going to go ahead and show you Matrix and how to actually put this into practice. As I mentioned in the chat section, you can ask questions. So if there are questions, please send them there, and I'd be happy to look at those questions and talk through them as soon as I'm done with the presentation here on the product. Okay, so now I have my Matrix open. As you can see, I have the 4 quadrants, front and center. So when I have a project open on the left-hand side, this is the structure of Matrix. On the left-hand side, I have my list of projects, right? So here I have my personal priority project open. But as you can see, I have other ones, my team priorities, my goals for 2024, team goals, customer leads. And then down here, I have other types of projects. And so one of the things I want to encourage you to do is not be scared to create a lot of projects. Projects is a way for us to organize and add context to the tasks that we have to do. So, whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, have the appropriate project for it. And so within each of those, you can have those priorities that you need to capture. Let me give you a couple examples. So let's just say if you're a sales manager, right, and you are working with extremely important customers, and perhaps you're trying to actually close the customers, and the process will take you 3 to 6 months or something like that. Then create a project for each of those customers. So now you can, whenever you go to that particular customer, you can see the tasks that you have. And then not only that, your customer success team, your engineering team can also be on the same page. So one of the things that I think is very, very challenging when we work with other people is that, it's hard for us, all of us, to communicate to everybody else what it is that's on our mind, what it is that we need done, and then what are all the due dates and what are the priority level. So by using Matrix, you actually have a very explicit way to do that. Now, within the matrix, within every project, the matrix is front and center, as we talked about before. So what that means is when you create a task in Matrix, you have to make the conscious decision to decide where that task goes. So for example, let's just say after this webinar, one of the things I want to do is I want to follow up with all of you, my participants, my webinar participants. So I'm going to say follow up with webinar participants, okay? And then this is a simple task that I have. One of the things I can do now is I can actually also say due tomorrow, 2 p.m. And what Matrix does is it actually uses natural language to set the due date for me. So if I go ahead and click add, what happens now, the task is created, and now on the right-hand side is what I call the item details. What that means is this is where I can actually add additional context or additional information around the task that I have here. And as you can see, the due date is automatically set for me for tomorrow. It's at 2 p.m. my local time. So we are all on very, very different time zone, but Matrix will capture your time zone and set the due date as appropriate. Setting due dates is very, very important. In my opinion, if you're trying to be very effective at prioritizing and you're trying to make sure that you work on the right things at the right time, you have to set due dates. I think it's okay to actually miss the due dates. I think that's actually a totally separate thing. But what happens is by setting due dates, it actually helps us understand what it is that we need to work on. When do we need to work on it by? Now, here's the thing that I think a lot of people miss. What happens is that you have a very important task. So for example, again, here following with all of you, it's something that I will do, and it's due tomorrow at 2 p.m. Now, as the due date approaches, right, what happens is it's top of mind for me. I'm thinking about it. It's like, oh, I got to get that done by tomorrow. But what happens if I miss it? What happens if it's tomorrow at 3 p.m. and I didn't do this task yet? Guess what? I have 10 other things that's on my plate. So I'm going to start to forget it. And this is a challenge that all of us faces, which is the urgent tasks, the things that are coming up, right? The next email, the next task on our calendar, and all that. That's the stuff that actually pulls us and pulls our attention away from the most important task. So one of the strategies that I recommend is actually to use the Party Matrix reminder system to ensure that you get this done. So now I have this task that's due, but I'm going to go ahead down here. I'm going to say, remind me daily. So now when this task is due and it's past the due date, I will get a daily reminder to ensure that I actually work on this. And I can't emphasize this enough because, what happens is that if you have so many things that's on your plate, of course, you can't set a reminder for everything. But for your most important tasks, having these recurring reminders ensure that it's top of mind for you. So whenever I have something that's really important, like following up with a key customer, I always set a due date. I would say due in 1 month, and then I would say remind me monthly. And that is a way for me to make sure that I will get to that task. And Party Matrix will send me the reminders to make sure that I tackle that until this task is finished. Now on the right-hand side, in the item details, there's a couple other things I can do. First, I can actually move this task to another project if needed, or I can star this task. So starring this task, what it does is it actually pushes to the very top of each quadrant. So my general recommendation is you should have at most 3 to 5 star tasks within any particular project. So the way I decide whether or not I star a task is whether it's very important or if it's something that I'm actively working on, right? So within a project that I might have 20 or 30 tasks. These are 3 to 5 things that I'm working on, or 3 to 5 things that I think everyone who's involved within that project need to work on. Those are the tasks that I star. If you star everything, then suddenly the starring process is useless, right? If everything's important and urgent, then nothing is important and urgent. So keep that in mind. Right below starring, I have icons. So when I click on icon here, I can actually just give a visual on what this task is related to. Where I've seen customer have some success is actually using the colors here. So red, yellow, and green. What I like about the color coding is that it's very visual. So for example, if something's behind schedule, maybe you can actually put it red. Something's at risk of falling behind schedule, you can make it yellow or green. And so as you can see within the matrix, after I select the icon, I can actually look at the matrix and see exactly the distributions of icons and so forth. Once you actually add icons, later on, you can actually sort by icons and so forth. So that might be useful as a way to actually evaluate the information that you have. Below that is ownership. So here, when I created this task, I'm the owner, right? This is my task. But what if someone else needs to take over that job? So I can actually click on this and assign to another person, and then I'm added as a follower. So what a follower is someone who actually gets updates on this task. So let me give you an example. Let's just say you're a manager and you have 5 direct reports that work with you. You create a series of tasks. You assign the task to each of your direct reports. Now, when they update that task, when they modify that task, or they mark it as done, as a follower, you get notification. Similarly, if you have a task and you're working with somebody else that's outside your team, you can assign the task, but you're interested in knowing the progress of this task, and that's what the follower is for. So essentially, there can only be one owner for every task, and that's something that's very explicit. You want to have clear ownership. So one person is responsible, that's their avatar that shows up, but everyone else who's interested in getting updates can be added as follower. And then next to that, you have progress, 0 to 100%. In Pretty Matrix, if you use subtasks, then you can actually, let's say you have 5 subtasks and you get 2 of them done, then the progress updates to 40%, but you can also override it as needed. What I use progress for is a way to notify everyone who's within this item that there's work that's been done, right? So imagine again, if you have a very, very important task, and that will take you, 2 weeks to actually work on and actually make progress, then setting a due date and setting a reminder might not be sufficient. You might want to go and change the progress to 5%, 10%, or whatever it is over time, so that everyone else who's involved can go and see, okay, you know what, we're making progress towards this. That actions have been taken. Next to that is effort. And so effort is just a way to say that not all tasks are created equal. So if you imagine if you're a manager, one of the things you can do in Pretty Matrix is open what's called the workload report. So you can see, okay, these are my team members. How many things do they have on their plate for this week? But not all tasks are created equal. Therefore, by setting effort, you can say, this task is going to be 4 hours of work. This task is going to be half a day of work. This task is going to take, 1 week, etc. So by doing that, you are able to manage workload for everyone involved. And then the reminders and due dates I showed you earlier, you can click on here and actually change it as needed. I love using the natural language where I just type in the chat. Again, I can say due in 2 weeks, due in 5 days, due in 3 hours. Remind me daily, remind me weekly, remind everyone daily, or remind everyone weekly. Those are the type of things that I typically use. So that's a matter of comfort for you. So, if you like typing, then that's something that you can do. Otherwise, you can click on these buttons as needed. Below that is the chat, and chat is where you saw that I typed these commands, but it's also the one place where you can have a conversation within context with your fellow coworkers. So, here's a challenge that I've seen over and over again. Let's just say if you use Microsoft Teams to chat with some coworkers and you're talking about different tasks that you have to do. Fantastic. That's great. You're able to have that conversation. The only problem is 6 months from now, you go back and you're like, hey, we were talking about that task and we were saying that these were the things we were going to do. Do you remember what we talked about? I'm sure you've seen that scenario happen over and over again. The problem in a regular chat is that it's flowing, but it flows without context. So by using the chat inside Pretty Matrix, you can have the conversation within the context of that task. What's powerful about this is that if you have to go and imagine again, in 6 months, you have to reassign this task to another person, guess what? They can look at this task and see the full history of all of that. And you've probably seen this with emails, right? There's probably been so many emails exchanges that's gone back and forth talking about different things. And then when someone else needs to take over the job, they have zero context. They don't know what's been talked about. They don't know what decision's been made. But the way it works with Pretty Matrix is that it tracks all of this in one central place. And then what's powerful about this too is the ability to attach resources. And so what that means is that when you have an email thread, you can actually upload that email into Pretty Matrix. So let me give you an example. Let's just say if you work with an external client and the client sends you an email to ask you to do something. There's a couple ways that you can approach this right now. You can forward that email to somebody and ask them to work on it, right? And then hoping that they get to that email at some point and hoping that they remember to answer that email. Or what you can do is you can actually take that email and convert it into a task into Pretty Matrix. And now you attach into the resources section. You're able to assign to the person, set a due date, prioritize it, and then have it within context. And then not only that, you can invite appropriate people to the task and they can all be on the same page. But here's the cool part. Imagine if you have to do presentations or create an invoice or attach additional documents or training materials, you can attach all of those within the resources section so that everyone who's involved within this particular task can get access to the same information. So in the resources section, you can link to your SharePoint, you can link to your Dropbox, your Box, your OneDrive, etc., all directly from here. So I'll show you shortly how to prioritize your emails. And then lastly, in the notes section, this is where you can add additional information around the task. You can also create subtasks. One of the cool features that we have is a thing called Fill with AI. The way it works is that it just takes the task that you have created here And then, it goes and builds out a description on what that task might be. So if you're assigning tasks to people, sometimes, the one thing you don't want to do is create a task and then type all these notes around, hey, do this and do that. By using our Field AI, it actually goes and actually create a description of that task for you, so then you can assign to others. So play around with it when you get a chance. And actually, in some scenarios, it will actually build a subtask for you as well. Okay, so that's the item details. So what I've shown you so far, I've shown you the different types of projects you might have. I've shown you that within the project, you have the quadrants where you can actually prioritize your task. And then within every single task, you have the item details where you can add the additional context. So what's truly important here? And I'll be honest with you, you don't have to use all of the features I just showed you to get the most out of Matrix. In fact, sometimes less is more. So if you're very new to the system, there's a couple things that I think you should do. One, you should create a project for personal priorities, team priorities, and your goals, right? So those are very, very straightforward projects because that applies to all of us at a personal level. In your personal priority project, this is where you create the tasks that you actually have to do. You might, if you click on the personal priority project, one of the things you can do is actually invite your manager perhaps to your project. So then your manager will have actually very good visibility on what it is that you need to work, what it is that you're working on. And so when you click on a project, the project details pops up here, and this is where you can add other team members. So that's one thing that I would recommend. The thing you can do with a project is you can star the project. And again, when you star a project, it pops at the top of the list. So if you're first starting Matrix, you might have 3 projects or 5 projects. Starring doesn't really matter. But in my actual work account, I have more than 300 projects. And so, like I mentioned to you, don't be scared about creating projects. I have 300 projects because they all pertain to different contexts on the work that I have. And so by doing that, by starring those projects, I'm able to focus on the projects that I care about most. And so, when you have that personal priority project, at least, consider inviting your manager, so then they'll be on the same page as you. And then when you have a meeting, you can actually have a very meaningful conversation on your priorities. Similarly, if you're a manager, you might want to have a project that you share with each of your direct reports, right? So now when you guys have your meetings, you're not just going to go and talk about, hey, what is it you're working on? What is it that you're thinking about? Instead, you can just open up Matrix and focus on the things that's in do now and in do later. And then if you have disagreements, that's where all the value of Matrix comes from. Okay, so that's the first thing I recommend. The second thing is when you create tasks in Matrix, make sure that you put them in the appropriate quadrant. So as you can see earlier, I created this task here in quadrant 4, but if it's something that's very important and urgent, I drag it to quadrant 1. So my general recommendation is no more than 25% of your task can be in quadrant 1. As I mentioned, if everything's important and urgent, then nothing is. So when you're doing your priorities, make sure that you actually put the right task in the right quadrants. Spend time on that part of the effort. That's the hardest part, but that's the most valuable part. As I mentioned, working on the wrong things, it's a waste of time for everybody, right? You don't want to be the person who did a perfect job on the wrong task. So instead, prioritize, then communicate with your colleagues, your managers, your direct reports, your coworkers, your executive team to be sure that everyone's on the same page, then put all your effort in to execute these tasks. Then within the tasks themselves, the features that I think are most important is one, of course, setting the due dates and reminders. Make sure you do that. Again, the dimensions of importance and urgency, when you think about urgency, time is really, really crucial. So having that understanding is useful. One of the things that Matrix does for you too is it actually tracks how long it takes you to get things done. From creating the task to actually marking as done, or every time that you change the due dates, it will update it for you. So what happens when you set the due date? First, what you're doing is you're setting accountability. And then if you have to change the due date, that's totally okay. You change the due dates, and then when you mark it as done, then you can see, okay, you know what? I had to shift this multiple times. And that's very, very valuable. I think people underrate the ability for us to, or underrate how important it is for us to be accountable to ourselves, not just to others, but, to our own goals. And so for me personally, I think for me, when I set my due dates, it's a way for me to track how good it is that I think, or how well I can actually execute on these tasks and when I would get it done by. So it's okay for me to change the due date, but every time I do, then I realize, okay, you know what? I should be a little bit more cognizant about how I set my due dates. But by setting reminders, it also ensures that I will work on those most important tasks. That's how I always end up being able to make sure that I work on those, answer those important emails, follow up with those important customers, etc. And then starring, especially once you have a lot more tasks within the system, so then you know exactly what it is you need to work on. And of course, delegation. So those are the core features that I think are most important in Matrix. If you do nothing else and you just do that, I think you'll find a lot of value almost right away. Now, let me just do an aside real quick around goals. One of the things that I mentioned, and I've done a couple of these webinars where, I talk about how people set goals at the beginning of the year, and now, we're mid-year through. Almost vast majority of people have completely forgotten whatever goals it is that they had for 2024. And the reason is when you first set those goals, you're very thoughtful about it, right? You're thinking about, okay, these are the things I want to do. These are my due dates. I'm going to achieve this and that and so forth. But what happens is when January turns to February, you suddenly have 10 other things that's on your mind. And then February turns to March, you have 20 things on your mind, and therefore you start forgetting it. And so the same thing applies to everything that we want to achieve. So that is where the reminders again come into play. So if you do have goals for this year or for this quarter, one of the things I want you to do is actually the following. One, create a project, goals for 2024, for example, or goals for Q3, whatever it is, and then go to here and then change the quadrant name so then it reflects different types of goals that you have. So for example, for me, I have a project goals for 2024. I changed quadrant 1 to long-term goals, then short-term goals, then anti-goals, and then catch-all. So when I do something like this, it allows me to write down everything that's in my brain, put it down into something that's tangible, and then organize it. And then this is what I do next. I set recurring reminders on those goals. And that's how you trick your brain into remembering these things that you thought you should do, and then you end up forgetting. And so, for example, this is a very basic thing, but imagine if one of my goals is to read a new business book every month. If I just say that one time, I'm going to forget it. But by setting the monthly recurring reminders every single month, Matrix reminds me, and I actually get that done. So it's a very useful trick. So if you do use Matrix to manage your goals, I recommend doing this. So let me show you how to create projects in Matrix, since we talk about creating project multiple times. If you click on projects here on the left-hand side, you can have the option to create project. When you create a project in Matrix, there are several ways. First is a blank project. When you click on a blank project, you literally will create a project that's a matrix that's completely blank, and then you can choose from a few basic templates, so Eisenhower Matrix or GTD method, etc. And then you just choose a color. The reason why the colors actually doesn't affect anything, but it's just a way to organize information. So for example, you could say personal things are one color, or engineering related tasks is one type of color, etc. So that's just a theme. So that's how you just create a very simple basic blank project. Or there's a couple things, other ways you can do it, which is you can choose what's called public templates. If you go to public templates, these are a series of templates that we have that we've created over the years, curated over the years, that lets you create a custom matrix with a custom name, and it's just different methodology that you might use as long as it fits within that 4 quadrants, right? So matrix is more than the Eisenhower Matrix. It's far, far more than Eisenhower Matrix. There's literally thousands of ways to use the 4 quadrant system. You can think about all the different dimensions. Importance and urgency is one set of dimensions, but you might have effort and impact, right? Or if you've gone to business school, you think about SWOT analysis, etc. So those are all the different things that you can do with Matrix to customize that. And if you go to public templates, we have a few here. And on our website, we actually have literally 1,000 templates available of all the different ways to use Matrix, and all of it is available to you for free. And then what happens too is as you use Matrix more, you might end up creating your own templates. So earlier, one of the things I mentioned is that maybe within your organization, let's say you're in HR, you have an employee onboarding process. So what that means is that when you have a new employee, you want them to go through these various training tasks. You want them to go and read these documents. You want them to go and whatever it is that you have to do. So, and you want them to do by a certain date. So what happens is you can create a Pretty Matrix project, set those tasks, set those priority level, set the due dates, and then you save it as a template. Now, when you have a new employee, you literally would go to here, click on My Templates, choose Employee Onboarding Templates, and then just set the start date. And Pretty Matrix will automatically create all those tasks for you, along with all those priorities, and set all the due dates relative to your start date. So it's a very powerful way, especially if you have a lot of recurring tasks. And this applies to employee onboarding, client onboarding, or even on a quarterly basis. If you're in accounting and you have to do the checklist to go through all the stuff for your accounting, right? That's another example. And then the last way to create a project with Matrix is with AI. So one of the things that we're trying to do here is we're trying to make it easier for you to achieve your goals. So for example, let's just say if you're in sales, one of the things you might want to do is you might want to improve your onboarding process. And so here you can say, improve onboarding process, right? So that's an example, and you just click next. And what happens is our AI system will actually build you a Pretty Matrix along with all the tasks and all the priorities for you, along with the due dates and some suggestions. And then from there, you can actually use that information to modify it or to delete the stuff you don't like, prioritize the stuff you do like. Similarly, if you are trying to get promotion this year, right, you can actually change this and say, get promoted from project manager to senior project manager. Imagine that was a goal that you have. You can type that into our AI system, click next here, and our AI system will actually build you a list of things that you ought to do in order to achieve that goal. So play with it when you get a chance. I recommend that using it as a starting point is actually extremely valuable. Okay, so those are different ways to create the projects in Pretty Matrix. So now I'm going to shift gear a little bit and talk about email management. I think that's one of the reasons why customers come to Pretty Matrix is because they get so overwhelmed with emails. So here I have my Outlook open. And so if you happen to use Outlook, Pretty Matrix has very, very powerful integrations within the Outlook ecosystem. So as an example, I get an email, and let's say that's a very important email, but it's not something I can answer right now, right? I mean, I'm sure this happens to you all the time. You'll get an email, it's important, can't deal with it yet. So what do? You flag it, right? That's actually a lot of us do that. You leave it as unread, and then hoping that the flagging and the unread is sufficient for us to get back to. And usually it's fine if you have 5 unread emails and 5 flag emails, but if you have 50 flag emails and then dozens of unread emails, guess what? It's not going to work. And for me personally, if I don't prioritize the emails that I have so many new emails that comes in that it's virtually impossible for me to remember what it is I need to work on. And then I would end up having to look through all the emails again. And I think if that applies to you, then you realize how important it is to prioritize your email. So here, let's just say I get this email and now I need to prioritize it. What happens is I can actually go to apps here. And then if you don't have this already, click on add apps and search for Party Matrix, turn email into task. This is our integrations that allows you to turn any emails into tasks. When I click on this option, I have 2 choices. I have the ability to prioritize email, so I'll go ahead and click on that. Now, what happens is on the right-hand side, a panel will pop up that allow me to prioritize this email. You see, the way it works is that it actually takes the subject of the email and put that as a task name. I can modify this as needed. I can actually choose what project it goes in. So let me give you an example. Let's just say if you are in sales and you're trying to deal, you get an email from a potential customer and you want to prioritize that email. You want to make sure that you don't forget it, right? You click on here and then you choose the project that's relevant to that customer. So let's just say it's Microsoft or something like that. Then you actually choose that project for Microsoft, then you prioritize it. You can even assign this email to another person, and then you can set a due date. So in one series of action, what I've just done is that I've taken an email, created a task, organized it into various projects, assigned it to somebody, set a due date, and then at the very bottom here, I can even say remind everyone weekly. And now I've set a recurring reminder to make sure that my coworker gets to this email, answer this email in a timely manner. And when the person answers that email, then they'll update this and I know that that actually has been done. If I forward an email, the problem I have is that I don't know if the person has seen it. I don't know if they know how important it is. And also, it's not on their calendar. There's no due dates associated with that forwarded email, right? So instead, by using Matrix, I can actually create so much more accountability for the things that my coworkers will have to do. And even for myself, sometimes I get an email and again, I can't deal with it in this week. And so I'll set the due date for 2 weeks. I'll set a weekly recurring reminder. And then on a weekly basis, I realize, okay, you know what? I really got to get to this email and answer it. And what's nice about Party Matrix is that when I do that, the email gets uploaded into the resources section here. So what that means is my coworker can actually open this email file and respond to this email directly from their system. And one of the things that's useful about the resources section, as I mentioned earlier, is that it's more than just emails. So again, if you were, assigning this task and asking your coworker to create an invoice or build a presentation, they can upload that presentation here. And now you guys can actually have a conversation around everything that you have to do in a meaningful way. And of course, Matrix lets you link to SharePoint or Salesforce or whatever, any web application that you have really here in the link section, and just keeps things very, very organized. Now imagine if you get an email, but you already have a task created. So as far as I know, Matrix is the only application that lets you attach emails to existing tasks. So now when I choose Matrix here, I can open Matrix instead. And now instead of creating a whole new task, I can actually search for the relevant task that I already have created and attach the email to an existing task. So if the customer follow-up, or if a different person sends a new email thread, but it's all tied together in one central place, then you can actually attach it into the same task and everyone who's involved will be on the same page. So that's the one thing I want everyone to recognize, is that Party Matrix create that single source of truth, as I mentioned, one central place to know the priorities, and then one central place to have everything that's relevant to that task. So I hope that as you consider using Party Matrix within your team and your organization, that's a value proposition to keep in mind. Okay, so that's how you can use the extension. But here's the thing. I'm on the go all the time too. So what happens is I might get an email on my phone, and I need to prioritize that email. And for me, I use an iPhone and I use Apple Mail. So I don't have an Outlook integration there. So what Party Matrix does is actually allows me to forward any email into our system. So if I go to Party Matrix, click on Inbox, there's a secret inbox address. I can copy this address right here. And this is an inbox address that I can actually save as a contact on my phone. So now when I get an email on my phone, to prioritize it, I just simply click forward. I would save, since I have the contact saved, I would say inbox. And then down here in the body of the email, I can say due, due in 2 days, remind me daily. And so by typing these separate lines and then clicking send, Party Matrix will actually parse that as commands. And so it'll set the due date for this email that I forwarded into the system, and it'll actually remind me daily as well. So I've seen folks actually just creating, let's say they have a new task that they need to create. Instead of actually opening up Party Matrix and create the task and all that, they will just send an email into Party Matrix instead with the due date, or with these commands as needed. So that's one other way that you can use Party Matrix, especially if you don't use Outlook. So this works with any email system. It works with Gmail. Even though we have a Gmail integration, this is something that I find very useful when I'm on the go. Okay, so that's how email prioritization works. Now let me go back and show you a couple of last things inside Party Matrix. And then lastly, I'll show you the Microsoft Teams integrations. So when you go back to your projects here, so for example, let me choose a project here that has a few more tasks. So here I choose a project. I've been talking about the quadrants over and over again, but in reality, there's many different ways to look at the same information, right? So I can actually go to the top here and change to the list view. And now the list view shows all the tasks I have, but in a list format. And what's nice about this is I can sort it by due dates, by modified dates, by owner, by quadrants, etc. So I like the list view when I have a lot of things that are overdue. So it's very easy to see the overdue task because it's red, and so it's very, very easy for me to click on it, look at the status, reprioritize it, change the due date as needed. And then also you can see that the star tasks belong in their own separate compartment here. So again, when I talk about, starring your task, this is one of those reasons. So then you can always get to the star task across your entire matrix. Then you have the calendar view, where every task that actually has due dates will have a calendar view here, and you can actually click on the task, you can drag and drop it to change the due dates, and Party Matrix will track all those changes for you. One of the things I want to emphasize is accountability, right? What happens is that if you assign a task to somebody, you want to know that they got it done on time. But then also, if they change the due date, you have that accountability in place. So Party Matrix, whenever you make a change to a task, it actually updates the record, and there's an audit trail for all of that. Now, if you have tasks that actually spends much longer time span than just a month or a week, that's what the timeline and Gantt chart is for. So with the Gantt chart, what happens is if you have a project that spans across 6 months or longer, you can go here, you can zoom out, and as you can see, I can actually see all the tasks, not just for this month, this quarter, this year, but also to the next few years. And so if you're a project manager, sometimes you just need a screenshot of this and put in your presentation, and Party Matrix generates this for you automatically. And you're able to actually, in Party Matrix, generate dependencies. So in the resources section, you can actually add dependencies to other Party Matrix item to say that this task is blocked by this task. This task depends on this task, etc. So these are different views that you have. One of the things I mentioned earlier is what I call the people-centric view. So on the left-hand side here, these are called global views. So what that means is that I show you the local views here on a per project basis, but the global view lets me see everything across all of my matrices. So if I go to the one-on-one, instead of actually looking at the tasks I have from a project standpoint, it shows me everything I have in common with another person. So if you're a manager and you have your various direct reports and they're working on a lot of different things, you can go to the one-on-one, select each person and see exactly what it is that they're working on. What are the things they have overdue? So I can change this person here. What are the things they have overdue? What are the things they're working on? And then I can click on each of these tasks, modify them as needed. And then not only that, I can actually create shared tasks with them here. So I don't have to even open any project. I can actually create a task, automatically assign it to the person, automatically add me as a follower. So when they update it, I get a status, I get an update as well. So this is very useful if you have a one-on-one meeting. Simply open up your one-on-one with your coworkers and you can see exactly what are the things both of you are working on together. There's a couple of other views here which I won't show you except for the search view, which is essentially what I call the master view in Party Matrix. It's the one place where you can see everything across all projects. And it's very useful if you're trying to understand, what do I need to work on? Or what are the things that I wasn't aware of? And so if you go to this view, you can click on overdue, and it actually shows you all the overdue tasks on everything that you're a part of, right? And then not only that, you can actually filter it to show you the things that are relevant to you. So our filtering system is extremely powerful. This is the one place where you can generate a report that says, these are all the things I worked on this past quarter, or these are all the things that my team members worked on this past month, etc. So Party Matrix actually shows you all of that here in the master view, and you're able to export that information as needed. Okay, so I talked about reminders earlier, and actually, the big question is, how do I get my reminders? And that's what the home view is. So when you start in Party Matrix, the home view is typically where the program starts. And so when you look at the home views, you have these alerts. These are items that require your attentions. That means these are items that were assigned to you. These were items that trigger the due dates or a reminder, or you were a follower for something and that task got updated. So when you look at the alerts here, essentially, you can click through each of this and then you can see, okay, you know what? These are the things that's relevant. These are the things that's not relevant. One of the things you can do is actually clear all these notifications. So I mentioned how important it is to set those recurring reminders, right? So imagine if you get a due date and then the due date triggers and then you click on the task and then you didn't do anything about it. Well, guess what? When you have those recurring reminders, it'll pop back up here over and over again to ensure that you actually get to that task and actually mark it as done. And then lastly, within the home view, there's a couple of other places. You have the agenda, where you can actually see all the tasks that you actually have to do this week, and then your items across the entire Party Matrix. Okay, I'm going to switch to Microsoft Teams real fast here. Inside Microsoft Teams, Party Matrix is one of the most integrated solution within Teams. When you have open Teams here, you can actually add apps and pin Party Matrix here on the left-hand side. But there's a couple of things that makes Party Matrix very unique, which is if you're in the chat with somebody, one of the things you can do is you can actually add the one-on-one view here, and you can actually see all the tasks you have in common with that person directly inside Teams, inside the chat you have with that person, without even opening Party Matrix. So what that means is you can actually use Party Matrix without even opening Party Matrix at any point in time. So it's a very useful way to know what your coworkers are working on. The other thing you can do is you can actually hover over every task here, and every conversation you have with a coworker. So let's just say you're talking to your manager. They say, hey, could you send me a report? You can hover over the conversation, click on this ellipsis, and create a task in Party Matrix directly from Microsoft Teams. So we try to make it as easy as possible for you to capture all these things that you're supposed to do, and then making sure that, make it easy for you to prioritize those, and then set due dates and so forth. And then the other thing that I strongly recommend that you do is actually install the Party Matrix chatbot. So what this is another place where Party Matrix will send you those recurring reminders as well as notifications on the things that's relevant to you. And the way you add the chatbot is you simply click on this plus down here and then search for Party Matrix and then add Party Matrix to your Microsoft Teams. So it's actually two separate things that you do, which is you can actually add Party Matrix as an application directly here on the left side, and you can add Party Matrix as a chatbot within the messages. Okay, with that, I'm going to go back to my presentation real quick and wrap this up. So if you do nothing else, make sure you sign up for Party Matrix and use your apps in Teams and Outlook if you're in Microsoft Suite. If you create a couple projects, one of the things I recommend is create a project that highlight your personal priorities, and then ask your coworkers to do the same. I think that's so powerful to be on the same page, to have that floating matrix above their heads as you walk around the office, and then you can focus the conversations on those differences that you have. And then always sit down and compare notes. One of the things that you have to recognize is that priorities are constantly changing. And Party Matrix makes it easy to see those shifting priorities without having a meeting. You don't want to have everyone together in the same room over and over again just to talk about priorities. Instead, they should be able to look at the Party Matrix, the team Party Matrix, and see, okay, these are the things we're working on right now. And then if you're ambitious, create a project for your personal priorities. Again, if you're looking for a promotion, create a project to get a promotion. And then invite team members to share those projects as needed. Some advice: make sure you use Party Matrix to track high impact tasks. Always think of Party Matrix as a communication tool. It's a way to communicate your priorities to others. It's a way for others to communicate their priorities to you. And that's internally as well as externally. And then make sure you use Party Matrix to manage your personal goals. And what success with Party Matrix should look like: one, you're checking Party Matrix every week to remind yourself of your goals. You have one central place to track all your priorities. And then at the team level, everyone on the team understands and are aligned on key tasks, and that if you have important emails and you need to prioritize and triage them, you use our extensions to make sure that you delegate those emails to the appropriate people. And then at the team level, you should be able to see everyone's priorities in real time, asynchronously. All right. With that, I will jump to the Q&A here. If there's any questions, send them in the chat, and I'd be happy to address them right now. Thank you very much. Okay, so I see a couple questions. How does our solution interact with Microsoft Planner? And so this is actually, Party Matrix can be used independent of Microsoft Planner, but you can also integrate Planner within Microsoft as well. So Party Matrix is actually far more integrated with Teams and Outlook than Planner itself. So if you used Planner before, you realize how limited it is in a lot of capabilities, especially when it comes around to team collaboration, when it comes to integration with emails and all that. Party Matrix has all the features that Planner has, and more. And then not only that, we actually have integrations, and I'll show you here. If you go to the Protomatrix connectors, right here. So if you go to connectors, the connectors page, you can actually integrate Planner, To Do, and all that, and actually pull these projects into Protomatrix as a one-way sync. How can you use Protomatrix for both personal and professional goals, and toggle between the two? That's a fantastic question. Actually, it's a very, very good question. So one of the things that I like to do is I like to have these separate projects. And that's earlier what I said about how don't be afraid to create different projects. So I would go ahead and create a project that's called personal goals. And so when you have your personal goals, you don't have to invite others. And so if you don't invite others, then you're the only person who can see this project. And so that's where you can track your personal stuff. And then for your team stuff that you work with others, that's where you create a different project. And then you in those projects, you invite the appropriate team members. And so when you are actually using Protomatrix, and you want to filter that information, there's a couple things you can do. But down here in the project tags, let's just say you have a lot of personal tasks and then a lot of, I'm sorry, a lot of personal projects and then a lot of work-related projects. You can actually tag each of those projects as well. Then inside the view here, you can actually search for those specific projects and narrow down the information that you're looking at any point in time. So that's the way that I will look at it when you're thinking about how to organize information in Protomatrix. With respect to uploading documents and so forth in Protomatrix, that's why we have the flexibility around being able to link to your own internal SharePoint systems as needed. So as mentioned, Protomatrix is a Microsoft 365 security certified solution. So what that means is Microsoft actually audit all our stuff. They do security tests on all our stuff. And so getting that checkbox is actually a very, very hard thing. But Protomatrix is one of the very few solutions that is Microsoft 365 certified. But regardless, one of the things you can always do inside the resources section is change it so then you can upload from your SharePoint instead. So if you have a business license for Protomatrix, one of the things you're able to do is actually change the upload system to use your Microsoft OneDrive. So what that means is your admin would do this and it would set that up. So then when files are uploaded into Protomatrix, it's uploaded into your tenant. So nothing on our side. So that's one way that you can get around that. But of course, again, you can always link to your Office 365 documents or your Google Drive, etc. And Protomatrix will just add that as a link here, and anyone can just click on that. And then if they have the proper permission, they can access that. One of the things I didn't show is the Edge and Chrome extension. So you can go and install Protomatrix for Edge and Chrome. And so if you're on a particular document, right, that you're in Edge, that in the SharePoint, you can click on the Protomatrix extension and create a task from that. And it actually will create a task in Protomatrix and link to that document for you. So regarding, using Protomatrix like a Kanban board, so it's interesting. Kanban view is actually one of the few views we don't have. But if you want to use from the perspective of, progress to do, as you mentioned here, a backlog and all that, one of the things that I would recommend is to actually update Protomatrix quadrants here to better reflect those things. So you don't have to have it done because you can actually just mark a task as done and it goes away, but you can actually change quadrant 4 to backlog. That's my general recommendation. The quadrant 4 is always sort of the catch-all, and then you can do the quadrant 1 is to do, quadrant 2 is in progress, quadrant 3 is on hold, etc. So that's how I would adapt it, by changing the quadrant name, the quadrant names, and then organizing your information that way. Fantastic. These are really good questions. I appreciate that. Now, if there's any more questions, please feel free to reach out to me, hi@affluence.com. And then as mentioned, we have recorded webinars that covers other topics as well. And then I believe that we have webinars coming up that talk about, collaboration, email management, etc. So if you're interested in any of the other ones, be sure to check out those webinars. As always, thank you very much for your time.